What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV, back here for more. Oh God, it
Can't
just
keep us away. We just keep coming back for more. Doesn't matter how much they put us through.
You know, someone came up to me in the stadium at the Newcastle game before kickoff. It was just like, he just says to me, "How do you do it? Like, how do you do it every day in that studio talking about this football club, the non-stop soap opera of this football club? How do you do it?"
It's just whenever you think they surely can't get more incompetent, they surely can't get worse. There's like another report, another nugget from a journalist gets reported, and it's like, oh my God, how is that even possible? Now we've got Ange talking about the mess that's going on behind the scenes. We've got more things that we didn't even know was going to come out from Paul O'Keefe, which we're going to discuss. Stuff about Thomas Frank we're going to discuss in this video about what's been going on behind the scenes there with his management. I mean, the whole thing is just so broken, and honestly, as Tottenham fans, I don't know, we just keep getting put through the mill about how our football club is being run, and they tried to portray from the outside, don't they? Everything's fine, you know, when they know what they're doing, and then the more that comes out, the more it becomes so clear that they are absolutely clueless.
Absolutely spot on. So incompetent. But look, we're going to get into the Ange stuff as well. I know all of you are very excited to get into that. Great interview, albeit quite short, from Ange Postecoglou.
But also, just before the Ange stuff, they were talking about Tottenham, and it seemed as though Neville and Carragher are finally like coming to terms with the fact that how much of a mess this board are. And even they were saying nothing's going to change until what's it called? They said nothing's going to change until the board go, and even they're starting to say it now. So we'll get into the overlap later, but it was interesting to hear them say that before the whole Ange stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But first and foremost, let's get into this update from Paul O'Keefe regarding the sacking of Thomas Frank. And he suggests that the Lewis family told Vinai Venkatesham and Johan Lange to sack Thomas Frank, with both of Vinai and Lange both still wanting to keep Frank, even as bad as it's got. We've known for a while that, you know, they were the kind of obstacles in sacking Frank all the way along, and he's been deserving of the sacking for quite some time. My breaking point was West Ham's. Sim's breaking point was probably a bit before that, or a long time before that.
And Ange was sacked as my breaking point.
But I think they wanted to sack him. I think the Lewis family probably wanted to sack him after that West Ham game. And even now, after that Newcastle game, even now with all the kind of demonstrations from the fans, game in, game out, home and away against Thomas Frank and against the way this club is being managed, they were still digging their heels in. They were still saying, no, this guy's our man. This guy is the man to turn it around. And luckily for us, the Lewis family undermine them. They completely undermine the guys that they've got in charge to make the decisions. The actual only slight football people on the board have been undermined at this football club by the Lewis family. They took control of the situation and they said, look, this ain't going on any longer. This guy needs to go. And surely after that makes Vinai and Lange's jobs untenable.
For me, 100%. If this is true, according to Paul O'Keefe, that he is suggesting that the whole suggestion that Vinai was the one who made the call to the Lewis family to recommend the sacking is just a PR puff to basically make it seem as though Vinai is the one in control, Vinai is the one making decisions, and obviously they're the football people and they're the one running the show when it comes to the footballing side of the club, which is obviously something we've been very critical in the past. You know, Daniel Levy sticking his nose in where it doesn't belong when it comes to the footballing side, him making too many decisions, signing players, hiring and firing managers and all that kind of stuff. Now, well, obviously Fabio came on board early on. We've had Vinai, I've had Lange, and we were told, you know, they were the ones going to be making the footballing decisions. And the fact that Vinai and Lange, first of all, Fabio's left apparently because of his disagreement over Thomas Frank. So that's already one footballing guy they're undermined, because he's or his kind of opinion's been undermined, and so much so he decided to lead the club to a team in the relegation zone in Serie A. He decided that's a better place for him. Maybe because he has more control, but I think first and foremost, I think his decision clearly doesn't hold enough weight. The fact that Frank was still here. Now you've got Vinai and Lange basically hanging on I don't even know what they're hanging on to, because the football was so dross. We'll get into it a bit later, but we're hearing behind the scenes the players were not on board with Frank. They didn't like his methods. They didn't like how he played football, which we'll get into in more detail. But they must have known all that stuff behind the scenes as well. I'm sure it wasn't a surprise to them that the players were not on board. You could see it on the pitch. You could probably see it in training behind the scenes. He didn't have the respect and the command of the players. Okay, and there's one thing saying okay, they don't have the respect to them, but if maybe if we just back Frank enough, he can outlast some of these players. A bit like how Poch maybe didn't have some of the respect to some of the dressing room early on, and come the summer he got rid of a bunch of players, Adebayor, Aaron Lennon, whoever else it was, the bomb squad who was at the time, Yunus Kabul, who weren't already on board with Poch, right? Maybe that was what we were thinking, but the reality is Poch was still getting good enough results to keep himself in a job. We ended up finishing 5th that season. We were hurtling like a steam train towards relegation, and it was so obvious that was going to be the direction of travel. The football was horrendous. I don't understand what they're seeing on the pitch to suggest that Thomas Frank is playing the football that is of a standard of our football club or any club that has the aspirations that we do. I think it's absolutely diabolical that they're looking at what was happening on the pitch, us playing just long ball, no direction on in possession, relying on set pieces, only focusing on the opposition and thinking this is something to stick with, and they've got this appointment correct and all it needs is time. I think the fact that they even at this point, even when we're at the very bottom with 5 points above relegation zone, it could have been 3 if not for a Man United late goal. The fact that we got to this point and they're looking at the situation and they're like, yeah, we need to stick with him. We need, he's still our guy. And it took for Vivian Lewis and the people in the boardroom, Charlie and whoever, it took for them who aren't like football people and. Yes, they're Tottenham fans. There's reports that they do want Tottenham to be winning more often and whatever. But it took for them to basically shake them a bit and say, look, this guy's got to go. Even apparently, by the way, we heard reports that they wanted, as long as 4 months ago, there were serious doubts about Frank, but they decided to trust Vinai and Lange because they're the football guys, so their opinions could be trusted. Even as close as, I think, the West Ham game, they had... At that point, apparently, according to other reports, they were ready to let go, but Vinai still suggested, and Lange, we need to keep him. He's our guy. We're going to back him. And they were like, even though they had serious reservations, they were like, okay, we're going to trust your opinion, right? Even at this point, the fact that it took them to turn to Vinai Lange and say, look, this has to end. This madness has to stop. You've clearly got this wrong, and you have to make the hard decision. The fact it got to that point is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous look on Vinai and Lange, but on top of that, as you say, they're the football people. So the fact that they made a decision, look, we're going to keep with him, and they still believed in him, and they're now being told by higher-ups, look, you clearly have impaired judgment here. Something's going on because we are hurtling towards relegation. This manager is clearly not the right fit. The players aren't playing for him, and you're still sticking with him. I am making the decision for you. What does that tell them about what they think of their opinion? What does it tell Vinai and Lange what the hierarchy think of what their decisions are? So for me, if they're making the decisions for them at any point, even though it's the right call in my opinion, that has to be the end of Vinai and Lange. They have to be out the door. And if I'm Vinai and Lange, I would resign because I can't do my job if I'm being directed from the higher ups to make decisions which are not in their remit when we should be making the judgment calls because we're the football people in the room supposedly, and we're supposed to be the ones making these calls because we have the expertise and the knowledge. We're being undermined by the hierarchies. They're telling us the decisions we are making are wrong, and we're making big mistakes here, right? Even though we've made our decision, that completely undermines them. On top of that, I think the Lewis family should sack them because their decision makings are wrong, and it's completely ludicrous that they have kept Frank on board for so long and as of now are still backing him. So the whole thing, like from Vinai and Lange's perspective, I would resign, and from the Lewis family's perspective, I would sack them 100%. The whole thing is an absolute mess. It's an absolute mess.
And you know what, like Charlie and Vivian, actually tried to do the right thing here throughout and trust in the people that run the show. They tried to put their faith in them. They tried to let them, run the show and make the decisions for the football club. And look, that's what they're hired to do, sporting director and CEO. They're supposed to be running the ship every day. But as things progress, as we're getting closer and closer to relegation, they can't just sit there and let the club sleepwalk to relegation, which essentially is what we're doing. So as the owners of the football club, I actually think they've managed this in the right way. Yes, fine, we can all say that they should have stepped in maybe a bit, close to the time, and maybe the West Ham game was the right point to step in. But when you've got people hired to do the job, you have to put your trust in them,
Absolutely.
right? You
That's
have to put your trust in them.
haven't we?
Exactly. You have to put your trust in them, and that's what they did. But it's all come to a head now, and I think they've come to the end of the road here, Vinai and Lange. There's nowhere for them to turn anymore, I don't think. Once you're getting undermined by the people above you, once you're getting decisions taken out of your hand, and a very significant decision as well, they have to go. Either they have to walk or they have to be sacked. And I really hope that decision comes, because these guys are absolutely clueless. Yeah. They really are absolutely clueless. Vinai, when he was at Arsenal, he had no love there, and he's trying to stick with Frank to kind of reincarnate the Arteta situation that was at Arsenal. No two situations are ever the same. You've got to remember that, Vinai. And Johan Lange, what has he ever done to be in the position that he's in at Tottenham Hotspur? Please tell me what he has ever done to be in this situation. He was at Aston Villa. They were also sleepwalking to relegation under Steven Gerrard. They took the power away from him. They demoted him, then they sacked him. And as soon as they did that, they started to go in the right direction. They brought in Monchi. They brought in better people suited to the job. And now they're fighting for Europe every season. There was even talks of them in a title race. They're making good decisions. And that's all off the back of Johan Lange leaving the club. So it's no surprise to me that these guys are at the helm at Tottenham Hotspur, and we're making wrong decision after wrong decision after wrong decision. And now they're being undermined. So there's only one way for this to end, and that is for them to go.
Football memes here, I don't know how true it is. He says Paul O'Keefe is saying that Lange and Vinai will be sacked soon. I haven't seen that. I don't know if you saw that.
I saw the comment. He didn't say they're going to be sacked soon, but he says, I think it's his opinion that they'll be gone sooner rather than later.
Right, it's just an opinion. Okay.
Yeah.
For me, once the Lewis family are forced to step in at that point, at any point, if you've got a sporting director who's been tasked with making those decisions, at any point in their tenure, if the Lewis family feel like they have to step in because they don't trust the decisions they're making, that has to be it. That has to be the end.
Once the trust is broken down, it's broken down.
Because how can you then trust them to make future decisions if you're undermining the decision on the current manager?
But the thing is, right, this brings a whole heap of problems as well, because we're looking for a manager now, whether it be interim or full time. Who's going to be making that decision? Mm-hmm. We don't want the Lewis family to make the decision on the next manager.
Yeah.
We don't want the Lewis family to be making a decision on the interim manager. We don't want Vinai or Lange to be making these decisions. So what the fuck do we do?
Absolutely. I think right now it's a massive, massive problem, because with Vinai and Lange, if with their opinions being undermined and their judgment not trusted on who to go to next, or who to go to right now as our current manager, because they stuck too long in this current one and still believed in him when it was clearly not working. If they're not trusted, and let's say we do sack them, who is going to make the decision? Can we make a decision on a new manager while we don't have a sporting director? Who makes the decision on who's going to be the new manager? It's 100% an absolute mess, and that's why we have to do this very, very quickly. Or do we wait to the end of the season, similar to what we've been doing? But then again, if Vinai and Lange know that they're out the door, are they going to be making the best decisions for the football club in the short term? If they know that come the end of the season, they're going to be out the door. It's a very, very horrible situation. We need a competent sporting director, and it's a thing we said before with when Ange came in, right? We hired Ange, didn't we, before we had a sporting director, and we were saying, how can you hire a manager before the sporting director? Surely that has to come first, because that is the guy who's going to implement the footballing strategy. He's going to be implementing from top down. What kind of club are we? What kind of football do we want to play? What kind of manager fits that? What kind of players fit the manager? All that kind of stuff, which is something that we've never done to a good standard at this football club. And that's the big Achilles heel, in my opinion, that we really struggle with, is that footballing strategy. But that starts with hiring a good sporting director good sporting director. And obviously right now we don't trust the people in that job because we've just undermined their current decision in the current manager. So if we don't trust them, how are we going to hire a manager right now? It's absolutely, how can we hire a manager without a sporting director in charge who we trust? And if we do sack him, how can we hire a manager without a sporting director at all? It's absolutely, I can't get my head around the mess and the incompetence that we are currently in right now. They should have, their sackings should have been announced at the same time as Frank's, for me. If
the thing is, right,
that's it.
yeah, fine, I agree with you. You know, they should be gone and it should have been announced. But you need someone in place.
Absolutely.
You need to get someone. You can't have them two out of a job and then just Vivian Lewis and Charlie just running the show here. Like, what are we doing?
Look, they've had 5 days. They've given themselves 5 days to find a manager. Give yourself 5 days to find a sporting director or whatever, because these guys need to get out the door.
I think the sporting director and the manager need to potentially come in together and be very much aligned together.
That's also an interesting, because I was listening to, I can't remember who it was yesterday on YouTube, saying maybe is it possible that when you hire, let's say, Poch, do you ask Poch what his suggestion is for sporting director rather than the other way around?
Mitchell.
Maybe he'll say Paul Mitchell, but instead of the other way around, you get a sporting director and he recommends a manager. Do you get a manager first, like Poch? Because the Poch thing ain't going away, is it? Like, we want Poch, he wants us. That's the score. So do we just turn around to Poch, say, look, we want you. Everyone knows that this is a partnership that works for both sides. Let's work with you and say, hey, what sporting director do you want? Who do you think you could work with? Is there anyone do you have in mind? Rather than going for a sporting director and then him maybe going for it in a different direction in terms of manager.
Because, you know, like, for too many years now, under Enoch, like, sporting directors have even undermined managers at this football club. I remember speaking to Martin Yole, and in his last season, Damien Comolli came in, and he said Damien Comolli completely undermined him and was, like, hanging around in the dressing room and all this kind of stuff. He hated that, and obviously that was the beginning of the end for Martin Yole, and I think I'm pretty sure it's happened in other periods as well at Spurs. So it needs to be a collaborative effort. Everyone needs to be singing off the same hymn sheet. Everyone needs to be able to work together, and everyone needs to be strung into the same philosophy and the same ideas. And then you might start to see a bit of light at the end of the tunnel at the football club. But right now, as it stands, Vinai and Lange need to be the next dominoes to fall.
I think
they really do.
They're dead men walking.
They have to be.
They are dead men walking, in my opinion. If that is true, what Paul O'Keefe said, and it's accurate, that they are still on board with Frank, and they didn't agree with his sacking, and they were forced to by the Lewis family. If there's any truth to that, then they have to go. They have to be sacked right now, in my opinion. Their judgment has been compromised. So I think the whole thing is crazy right now. What kind of football club is this? We're supposed to be one that is, you know, challenging for big honours. You know, we've got some of the biggest revenues in the whole of Europe, and this is how we're run from a footballing standpoint. It's beyond a joke. It's beyond a joke.
Absolutely. Look, so that's the situation regarding that. More crazy stuff to come out as well, I'm sure of it. But let's get